This is a podcast about new crops. You're going to love it. Join us on The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin.
They would say, okay, it's dry, and they would show us this kind of limp stigma that clearly wasn't dry. It was dry-ish. And it's critical that the stigmas are dry, because when they go into the jar, if they are not dry enough, they will mold.
Welcome back to The Cutting Edge, a podcast in search of new crops for Wisconsin. I'm your co-host, Evan Henthorn, with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, serving as an agriculture educator in Adams County. And joining me as my co-host is Jerry Clark, agriculture educator from Chippewa County. And our guests today are Parker Shorey, founder of Lemon Fair Saffron Company. We have Jonathan, Arash, and Margaret all joining us back again for our next segment of Saffron. So, who is excited? 2.0, here we go. Jerry, how are you doing?
Doing well, Evan. Thanks for that introduction. It's cold enough, so it's great that week. I think it's like 20 below tonight and a high of, get above zero today here in mid-February. And I think it'd be great to talk about flowers or something outside for a minute.
Absolutely.
Cooped up.
Yeah, I can tell you, I am ready for spring. I'm ready to get outside and enjoy warm things again.
You bet. All right. Well, we got our guests here today, Arash and Margaret from the University of Vermont. And Arash, I'm going to start with you. So this saffron, we kind of talked about some growing techniques last week, what it is, kind of general overview, but is there really a market for such an expensive spice? And maybe just give us another little background on what it is and where this market's at.
Yeah, thanks again for having me in your program. Yeah, actually, for answering your question, we have to look at the evidences that we have. The evidences showed we imported more than 71 tons of saffron in 2019. That means we are a consumer. 71 tons is talking about something between 10% to 20% of the global production of saffron. So we have a market somewhere in the United States. On the other hand, I should say every saffron growers, local or American saffron producers that I know, they could be able to sell their products. So when we have a look overall, we see like, yeah, there is market and the market is not still saturated for the growers.
So we're able to see some potential out there. And I think that's where we're glad to have Parker with us as a new guest today, working as a grower and distributor. Just tell us a little bit about your farm background, Parker, your business, and where you see the opportunity for saffron.
Yeah. First, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm from Vermont, and I always consider Wisconsin and Vermont as friends. We have the cheese connection for sure. So I have a farming background, just growing up farming. My summer jobs were farming in different places, helping out. And I got interested in saffron when Arash and Margaret published their first study. And like a lot of people starting up, I loved the idea, and I went after it with a greenhouse and some raised beds and grew saffron in 2017 in Vermont. So through that experience, I learned a few things. One is that actually was more interested in the drying of saffron and the quality that could come out through the drying process. And I also felt like to expand, I needed to expand through partnerships with other small farms versus more acreage myself. So Lemon Fair Saffron Company was founded as a way to partner with these farms, sharing growing tips with them, and then purchasing saffron and marketing it in the market of New York City. Which is where I'm based half my time. So bringing that U.S. grown saffron to the markets of New York and trying to create a market that. So that's where we are. We're a few years in. I have a partner, Hannah, who's been amazing, helping on Instagram, the website, and we're getting good traction. I'm happy to talk more about that.
Parker's website is beautiful, and it makes you want to eat the food that he is recommending. And it just, if you want something warm and to make you feel better, you need to go to his website.
Well, listeners, to make it easier for you, we'll just give you the website. Lemonfair, F-A-I-R, saffron.com. Lemonfairsaffron.com. That's all one word. Lemonfairsaffron.com.
Awesome. So Parker, you kind of touched on it, but you said are you using a lot of social media? Did I hear Instagram? And kind of, can you just elaborate a little bit more on that and how you are making this reach to people and promoting your product?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'd say Instagram is perfect for Saffron. It's obviously a very visual tool. There's a lot of food and foodies already on it. The colors of saffron, from the flour itself to the final dishes, it's really perfect for Instagram. What we're doing is sort of regular posts, educating people about all parts of the process, from growing to recipes. I will say we've noticed the recipes, the food is getting the most engagement. As Margaret said, we have a saffron hot toddy that I think people like. We have saffron sort of butter pasta sauce that people like. So that stuff is getting good engagement. So we're posting, we're doing a little bit of advertising on Instagram. And then we'll go through influencers. So people that have, several thousand followers, and our chefs will send them product and say, can you make something and post about it?
Awesome. Okay. So can you just back up 1 second and just kind of explain, like, how do you go about selecting growers that you want to work with? And can you explain that process?
Yeah, we really love this idea of a partnership of farms, and the selection process it's really just getting to know farms. That often they'll come to us, or Margaret will recommend them. We'll share our partnership agreement, which is kind of like the criteria of what we look for in a farm and the methods of harvesting, drying, and caring for the saffron. And then we'll have a conversation about what they're looking to do, and how we can support them. We have 3 farms right now that we have multi-year agreements with. And we're just always in touch with them around harvest season. We'll come and work with them and buy their saffron. So it kind of works well for farms because they don't have to think about packaging, website, legal, customer care, shipping. We'll buy their saffron at the beginning of the season, and we'll take care of that stuff.
So Jonathan, Jonathan's a farmer here in Wisconsin, and how is that? Have you connected with Parker's Lemon Fair Saffron? I know last podcast we had with you, it sounded like you were selling everything locally. You had enough to kind of meet the local market here in Wisconsin or wherever you're getting it. But how do you see that market developing with someone like Parker, who's close to a major metro city like New York?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to look at Parker's website, and I'm just blown away at the quality, but also just the storytelling of it and be able to capture it. And it's something I would aspire that I could do locally here, just not quite there yet. So I think it's just being able to tell the story of what saffron is, how it can be grown, and then really focusing on that local quality, because as a spice, it is one of the most adulterated, spices. And I think, having that connection with where it's grown, who it's grown by, there's this trust and this relationship built between the end customer, the person, the chef, the person who just wants a nice quality meal with a unique spice, and they can get down the road from them. So we a couple of years ago, we registered a domain, Wisconsin Saffron. We had, ambitions of wanting to just kind of help connect other small growers in Wisconsin, because growing a lot of saffron for us isn't an ultimate goal. We're limited in our space. Plus, I think it also hedges us against from catastrophic disasters or any maybe insect or bacteria or any kind of fungal thing that could happen or weather. So we want to work with other growers in the future. And currently we're selling exclusively through Camo Cooperative, which is a cooperative that my wife Mara and I and other military, veteran, family, small businesses started in Northeast Wisconsin near the Appleton area. So we've just been exclusively selling to our customers through there. But we want to work with other farmer veterans through the Farmer Veteran Coalition. We have the Homegrown by Heroes label we can use to help promote that. And I think there's just a lot of opportunities, but we wanted to get really good at trying to grow and make sure that we can replicate it from year to year and season to season. And that's where the Saffron Net and the work that Arash and Margaret and the team is doing in Vermont has been incredibly helpful. So, and then also work like Parker's doing and other growers, it's just helping us all elevate our standards, but also, you know, ambition to do more. So I'm excited about the future.
Great. No, I really appreciate that network that you've developed through that co-op and having these connections. And Margaret, from a national standpoint, or North American standpoint, as this is probably grown in Canada, I can't recall if we covered that a little bit last time, but it sounds like there's an opportunity here based on what Arash said that we import 17 tons of this stuff. And there's a market that obviously we have untapped. So what's the potential out there for, you know, small farms to really get into this?
I think the potential is awesome, really. And it's something that's being developed slowly. Saffron is such a new concept for a lot of people that the first thing is just to introduce what the crop is and what's involved with growing it. It's not for everybody. There's some people that had started growing it in 2017 and they decided, their back wasn't up to bending over to pick the flowers or whatever, or it was too fiddly. But then there are other ones that started small and they've expanded to 1/4 of an acre or more. So it really varies from individual to individual. And every year, every week, we get multiple calls from people around the US who are interested in trying it out.
And Margaret and Arash, again, for listeners, they're from University of Vermont, but are there other universities looking at saffron right now? Are you guys the leaders and kind of cutting the edge here? And that's why our podcast is called The Cutting Edge. We try to find guests that are doing unique things and moving forward.
There definitely are there's at least one other university, and that's the University of Rhode Island. I think there are a couple of other universities that are interested in getting into it, or maybe are just getting started, but they haven't necessarily reached out to us, some of them. But we have worked closely with the University of Rhode Island in the past. This is really a new crop, and it's taken a while for the USDA, which is a primary funding source for grants. It's taken a while for them to embrace the concept. And it's still a little bit too exotic for them in general. And I think that's why they don't collect data on saffron production in the United States. Not yet. I think as the industry increases, it will become a crop worth reckoning with, but it's not quite there yet.
When we are talking about other universities are working on saffron, it's not just about crop production. I know, for example, Howard University in DC, Howard University, they are working on assessing the effect of saffron or saffron extract on colon cancer or anti-carcinogenic effect of saffron. Because saffron has pharmaceutical effects, I'm pretty sure that lots of researchers, they are working on that aspect. And I believe the first paper has been published in United States many, many years ago. I'm talking about 150 years ago about pharmaceutical effect of saffron on some of the disease like antidepressant thing and, anti-carcinogenic effect. I cannot remember the name and the exact year that paper published, but I will try to find it and publish it and put it in our website very soon.
Generally speaking, my understanding is that most of the saffron that is imported into the United States is used for culinary purposes. But whereas I think overseas, the use of saffron medicinally is much more widespread. And there needs to be more research done on the quantitative capacity of saffron to address some of these medicinal issues. And one of the things that is exciting to me about what Parker has done is when he comes up with his agreement, he has specific guidelines for how the saffron is prepared for drying. So the saffron stigma is reddish or orange, and then at the very end of it, at the base of it, it's kind of yellowish. Now, Parker doesn't want the yellow bits on there, so he asked the growers to pinch that off. And whereas there are other growers that aren't as particular about that. And so when we look at the research done on medicinal aspects of saffron, there needs to be some consistency with regard to the way that product that they're testing is produced. And I'm not sure that's there yet, which is why we end up with a lot of variability in the results in terms of how effective it is. So hopefully over time, the US industry will be more standardized so that we can start addressing that better.
Awesome. So Parker, can you just kind of follow up with what Margaret was saying with kind of your standards or your grade of what you want to take or accept into, and what happens to the product that's not, that you don't accept? Like what happens to it? Does it just go into a waste system, or is it, do we have a new market for that waste, or is it, can you just follow up on that?
Yeah, there's a lot there actually. I agree with Margaret. I think quality standards should be priority number one. Quality and food safety standards should be priority number one as we're building this US market. You know, when I was first visiting farms 2017, 2018, driving all over Vermont, there was some saffron that had leaves in it and a little bit of dog hair. And obviously every year things get better and better. And I think we have a partnership agreement that is very clear on the process we find yields the best output, the best results. Everyone does it a little different. I think this is kind of the secret sauce, is how you grow it and then how you go about drying it and curing it. I'm curious to hear Jonathan's POV. You know, I love what he's doing in Wisconsin. We are inspired by the colder growing regions in like northern Italy. And traditionally that was dried over a wood fire. So we try to finish the drying process with a little bit of that wood fire. We kind of like it and the radiance it brings out. But again, this is kind of the secret sauce. People have ovens, sun-dried, dehydrators, fire. It depends where in the world you're doing it and who you talk to. It's quite fascinating, I think.
So I wanted to mention one other thing. We've spent a fair amount of time in our workshops talking to growers about how to dry their saffron. And it's not as cut and dried as you might think. And there have been instances where people have not, you know, you say to somebody, well, you just dry it until it's dry, the stigma. Just keep drying it until it's dry. And the first year that we started working with growers, they would say, okay, it's dry. And they would show us this kind of limp stigma that clearly wasn't dry. It was dry-ish. And it's critical that the stigmas are dry, because when they go into the jar, if they are not dry enough, they will mold. And there have been people that have produced saffron, and it's in those particular cases, rare, but they do occur, where they haven't been dried enough, and then that does need to be destroyed. But I think that's why it's great to have Parker saying, no, here are the standards that I have. It must be dried at this. You have a temperature, I think, that you expect them to dry it at, yes?
We do, Margaret, but we have to allow some flexibility around that temperature because of what you described. There's so many variables. If they're picking on a wet, rainy day versus a very sunny day, we may dry it a little bit differently. So we have some flexibility and just an agreement about that exact temperature. I also, Evan, just wanted to answer your question about the dregs or the leftover. So we're only buying from farms that we feel have excellent saffron and adhere to these standards. There's always some leftover saffron because when we jar it, we want full threads and kind of beautiful, complete threads for the consumer. But there's always going to be some threads that break and are at the bottom of the jar. I think that's an interesting area to explore. We looked at a saffron sea salt that included some of those smaller threads. So it's like a white sea salt with the red threads in, and people loved it. I liked it too, but we found over time the shelf stability wasn't great, so we continued to tinker with that. We're also looking at a candle, so an infused saffron candle. And in general, I think this idea of saffron waste, you have the petals, you have the stamens, and then maybe you have some of the actual stigma. There's a lot of people trying to figure out, can you dye with this? Can you put it in something else? Can you make a tea with it? And I think that increases the total kind of income per flower, which is what farmers want.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of investment in that harvesting from what we learned from Jonathan last week. And Jonathan, maybe you can make a comment that along the lines that Parker's going down here, but it seemed like, yeah, there's a lot of labor and effort, a lot of work going into getting that little thread, and you've got this other flower parts that are just sitting there. So any comments along those lines that Parker just mentioned?
Yeah, I he's talking about the different elements, and I think of like sometimes when it's snowing and you're harvesting. So we tried, I think in 2017 was when we had our first harvest on a small scale, and we had like a Nesco dehydrator, and we were trying to get a certain temperature. We waited when it was the wet weight, that's after it was harvested, and then weighing it after it was dried, try to get this consistency. And then we tried a few batch, after subsequent years, and it was never consistent, like a certain amount of time or temperature. It was situational depending on the season, the weather, but just in general. So I think you have to have a feel for it and make sure you're closely monitoring. And I think for us, we tried all the other things, like trying to separate the stamens and the petals, dry those, because I think some of the initial workshops in Vermont that Arash and Margaret referenced, there is potential to use other parts of it. And if, as a small scale producer, I want to increase the value added products that I have. And if it means something that I'm growing that's quality and I'm taking a lot of time into producing it, I want to maximize that. I don't like wasting things. I came from Ukraine as a young child. I don't like wasting anything, especially food. Maybe the flower just has some beauty to it, and some aromatic. The nature of it is also really just nice. So I open up a jar, like I have here a jar from our 2017 batch, and I just love that aroma and just the smell and how it still carries and lingers after it ages some. So I certainly, I think what Parker's doing, I want to explore more of other drying options, but like you said, it varies from season to season.
So there's a lot of factors that go into producing such a quality product. And I'm just wondering, Arash and Margaret, can you kind of touch base? Like, have you guys done research around how much income is being made and revenue is being made off of this product?
So we do a survey every year among saffron growers, mostly in North America. That's sort of what we're focusing on. And it's certainly not complete at this point, but every year the number of growers that are producing more saffron is increasing. So for example, in 2017, most growers were growing less than 28 grams. And so you got to realize that growers, if they're lucky, they're selling it for $30 to $50 a gram. And so in the last year, in 2019, there were maybe almost 20% of the people that replied. So out of, I think we had about 125, 150 people replying. So almost 20% of them were producing between 29 grams and 100 grams. And so that was just showing an increase over time, that more and more people are growing more, which makes sense because the whole way saffron, you plant it the first year, you don't get a whole lot of flowers. You only start getting a better yield in years 2 and 3. And so we are seeing that increase over time. Just one other thing we tried to get information on was, where are people selling it? And that's changing every year too. And I think the pandemic has had a big impact on that. So for example, in 2018, most people were selling from their home farm stands. This past year, in 2019, which sort of includes 20 as well, like 31% were selling it online. And so those kinds of things are changing. And some of that's because people have websites now, and so they're promoting it on their website so that they can sell it by mailing it in through mail order. And so those things are evolving all the time. And I know that there are growers, not just in Vermont, but throughout the US, who want to expand, refine how they do it. There aren't very many Parker Shoreys out there, and he really focuses on Vermont. So most of these other growers need to figure out their own way of marketing it. There are a few that are using saffron as an agritourism link. So they might have an Airbnb and they get the people to come during the harvest season so that they can help harvest it and dry it. And so there's lots of different avenues that people are trying.
So Jonathan, through your Camo Co-op, is that more just direct marketing to? Are you going through the co-op to the end user, or are you going directly through to the user?
Yeah, so a combination of both. Right now, since we're the founders and one of the member owners of the co-op, we're just going right to the consumer. But as we move forward, we're going to expand. Some will be at our stand, some mailing, online order, focusing on the Wisconsin area. And I think part of it is, you talked about the agritourism. It's such a beautiful sight to see, in October, November when they're blooming. We want to offer like workshops for people, so they come and get their own corms. They see us plant it, and they take theirs home and plant it, and then they see how many threads they get. So it's part of the experience, and just celebrating it. Because like, as I think, I mentioned previously, when your other vegetables are kind of on their end of life there for the season, saffron is at its peak, and it just like adds some optimism for the next season. So I love that aspect of it, and we will continue growing saffron and expand.
Go ahead, Parker.
I really agree with what Jonathan said. The saffron blooms, or the purple, the yellow, the red, at the same time you're getting fall foliage, and the aroma, it's like something to behold. So really, I think that agritourism, when COVID has passed, is a really interesting idea. We also shipped some corms out to people, and they were able to see some blooms. It's a little bit of a roll of the dice that first year. You get maybe 1 flower out of 3 corms, but people, it's like a surprise in the dreary fall weather.
Another thing that's worth mentioning, and maybe Arash can talk about it, in Vermont, we have a fair amount of solar arrays now, because we're trying to be more energy efficient as time goes on. And one of the issues is there are some regulations or restrictions with regard to building solar arrays, that they cannot be built on agricultural land. And the reason is because the legislature or the government doesn't believe, they're concerned about losing viable agricultural land. And so we partnered with a solar company to look at saffron as a potential crop that could be grown in association with conventional, solar arrays. And Arash, maybe you could talk a little bit about what some of your results were.
Oh, actually, we harvested great results from that research side. And one thing that I want to mention is like when I had a conversation with the guy from that solar array farm, the manager of that electricity generation site, he said, we want to show that we have heart. We are green. We want to use the land not just for industrial purposes. We want to grow them because we have land there. So don't forget, saffron is a low maintenance crop, and they want to produce something. At the same time, they want to have a product, have a crop that doesn't need that much laborers and workers all the time to go there and reduce the potential of making damage on the panels and solar cells. So we started doing planting saffron in those sites because of these reasons. And the yield was awesome. In one of the treatments that we had in the raised beds in those farms, we harvested around 17 pounds of saffron per acre. When we convert the data, it's like 17 pounds of saffron per acre. We are talking about $119K gross revenue. It's like huge money. And it shows that, it confirms that how the data that we harvested so far or collected are great.
Well, the other thing from an environmental standpoint, commonly in these solar arrays, they get weeds growing and they don't like the weeds growing. So they spray herbicides to keep those weeds down. And so if it was possible instead to be growing a crop, especially a high value crop that doesn't take a whole lot of time, then maybe these solar array owners would be less inclined to use a herbicide and more inclined to try and develop the land as an agricultural benefit. So that's a win-win opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're seeing. Yeah, we're agree, Margaret. I think we're seeing that movement, even from a groundwater quality standpoint. This permaculture, keeping permanent cover on the ground, especially when you have the solar array. That's a great. It seems like a perfect fit. So, Arash, these were in raised beds, not planted directly into the ground, or was there with your research, was it kind of a little of both and seeing how things performed?
Yeah, a little of both.
Okay.
Actually, we compared it in-ground and raised beds because saffron is originally from arid and semi-arid area, and having them in the raised beds makes a better drainage system, make it soil moisture content like more appropriate for them. So that was the reason we tested that, and we hope that we publish the results very soon.
So you asked before, so how much are growers really making from saffron? And again, we have encouraged growers from the very beginning to start small, and they heeded our warnings or our advice. And so by design, the industry has been relatively small area-wise, but just based on our last survey, about 18% of the people that replied were making, this is gross now, $2,000 to $5,000. 5% of them were making $10,000 to $50,000. So it's showing a couple of things, that the revenue that people are generating is increasing every year as both the amount of area that is being cultivated in saffron is increasing, but also more people are growing it and it gets older, and so it's getting more, there's just more harvest for that original field establishment. And so we have never necessarily promoted saffron as a single crop for a grower. We have always focused on how can we support small diversified farmers to increase their revenue potential. That's not to say there aren't some growers who have said, I really want to focus on saffron alone. There are some growers in Vermont. They just want to grow saffron and that's it. There's some out in California. That's all they do. They don't grow a bunch of vegetables and all these other things. But in general, most of the people that are growing saffron are doing it as part of a total farm program.
And Jonathan, I believe that's kind of how it fits in, like you mentioned earlier. You know, it's ready to harvest when a lot of your other work is wrapping up for the year here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to be as a complementary crop towards the end of the season because, you know, the rest of the fields, or, you know, you might start getting some of the frost, and then you just see like the imminent winter approaching, and it's like the last kind of hurrah and just kind of optimism. So maybe, you know, it's a nice distraction from all the other work to do yet to kind of get ready for the winter. But yeah, we wanted it as a complimentary, so people come out to the farm, you know, support us, but then, you know, maybe also buy some of those other products and food that we have, you know, on the farm when maybe they wouldn't be as inclined to come out because it's getting colder. So.
One other thing that's worth noting, we're getting ready to hold a saffron workshop in an online version this year. One session is going to be on March 11th and another one is on March 18th. And if they go to the North American Center for Saffron Research and Development, they will find the link to register.
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity for, you know, podcast listeners, our listeners, and then we will share that through our website as well. So if Margaret and Arash can get that information to us here in Wisconsin, we will definitely put that on our website and make those connections with the growers. Anything else, Evan, before we wrap up?
No, I think that's good. I think this has been a really quick and good discussion, and just a nice segue from our original discussion on it. And I've learned a lot again. I learned a lot the first time, so I'm really thankful that we were able to connect with you guys today, just to further our discussion on saffron.
And I don't know that we're really through with this group yet as a podcast. We'd really like to spend maybe another session on just production. Last time we kind of took that overview, but really maybe, and then today more marketing. What's the opportunity for a small farm, how it fits in with the system. But if we can invite you all back in a few weeks, I think we'll try to address production and really dive into, you know, how do we make this stuff grow, especially from with Jonathan here in Wisconsin. I think that's our goal, but the climate's very similar in Vermont. We really appreciate everyone joining, and Parker especially with that marketing side, and we'll invite you back too, Parker, as far as that avenue to try to distribute this growing crop.
Thank you very much.
Brought to you by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension.